Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Care and Support for Library Workers, Holding Grief, Trauma, and Each Other. My name is Loida Garcia Fibo, and I am deeply appreciative of your presence here today. I'm leading this effort through the Reforma Kindness Affinity Group in consultation with Reforma's president and president-elect. The topics we are addressing in this webinar come directly from the voices and lived experiences of our members. The Kindness Affinity Group held consultations and together with the president identifying this as our first topic for online events, community care. And big thanks to the affinity group, Reforma President Adi Huertas, Reforma Vice President Edwin Rodarte, and Madeline Peña, who is supporting the Zoom and many other things today. Next, after this event, we will address menopause matters in librarianship on April 8th. That's the second theme identified by the Reforma Kindness Affinity Group. And you can register for that event on the Reforma website. We already have a page for that. Today's theme, community care, reflects what library workers are navigating every day in their institutions, in their communities, and in their own lives. Libraries have always been places of refuge, spaces of learning, safety, dignity, and connection. But in recent years, many of us have felt a shift. Our libraries are not only community anchors, they are also spaces where grief shows up, where trauma walks through the door, where collective stress from economic stability, natural disasters, political tension, and public health challenges becomes part of our daily public service work. And at the same time, we are not separate from these realities. We, library workers, are members of the very communities we serve. Many of us are supporting families and neighbors experiencing these stressors while also carrying out our personal transitions and life stages. So supporting library workers means acknowledging the full spectrum of experiences that shape our well-being, both professional and personal. Today's session is about care in its full sense. And this conversation brings together social workers and library leaders deeply engaged in trauma-informed and community-centered work. Together, we will explore how we care for our communities and how we care for ourselves and one another during difficult and uncertain times. Our program will move in a thoughtful progression. We will begin by grounding ourselves in theory, big picture framing, including helpful strategies that can be applied to our daily work. And we will then shift into real world practice, hearing what embedded of a social work looks like inside a public library, responding perhaps to homelessness, mental health crisis, and grief in real time. And these are from understanding trauma to emotional tools to direct service practice. All of these remind us that care must exist at multiple levels. And while our systems level speakers is unable to join us today due to illness, the conversation about institutional responsibility remains essential. Building cultures of care is not optional, it is necessary for sustainability. I also want to acknowledge something particularly important. Many of our communities, especially communities of color, immigrant communities, and historically marginalized groups, experience collective and cultural trauma in distinct and ongoing ways. Immigration uncertainty and racialized violence are unfortunately very much part of these realities, facing the communities we serve. Ethnic library associations and affinity groups can serve as healing spaces within our profession. And through Reforma, Kindness Affinity Group, we are intentionally creating this space for culturally responsive care, collective reflection, and solidarity. We want to support library workers who are helping communities experiencing grief and trauma and who may also be experiencing these realities themselves. Both matter and both deserve care. Before I introduce our speakers and Reforma President, I would like to say that this event will be recorded, and the recording will be shared not only with Reforma members, but with our colleagues from the National Associations of Librarians of Color that we want to also support. Our speakers today are Dr. Beth Wahler, and she is a widely recognized social worker, consultant, and co-host of the Surviving the Stacks podcast, followed by David Perez, social worker at the Long Branch Public Library in New Jersey. He brings a powerful on-ground experience responding to crisis, grief, and community need in real time. And some of you may remember him from another event that he participated from the ALA think tank with the American Library Association and San Jose State University last year. Thank you all for being here. And I would like to now to welcome Reforma President Adi Huertas. Welcome, Adi.
Gracias, Loida. Thank you so much. Buenos días a todos. It's still morning here and on the West Coast in San Diego. So I just wanted to say a brief hello to everybody and welcome you to this very important topic and conversation. I also want to express my deep appreciation to Reforma's Kindness Affinity Group for curating and working within community, not just within our libraries, but also beyond to bring forward these important topics that are addressing a lot of what we're hearing from our membership and from folks in libraries in general as well. So thank you so much, Loida. I want to also thank my colegas that are supporting from Reforma that are supporting this event today and that help put it together. And of course, our panelists and our subject matter experts that I'm really excited to hear about from today, Dr. Beth Wahler and David Perez, that are helping us bring this information to you kind of like on a wider level as well in terms of libraries and how libraries are feeling these impacts, but the importance of really collaborating with each other and understanding from subject matter experts how we can build supports for our community care. And that community care really includes all of us, right? It includes caring for yourselves and also how to care for yourself so you can better care and respond to community needs. So I want to thank all of the participants today tuning in, all of the folks that registered. Reforma is, as all of you know, is a national organization that supports library services for Latino and Spanish-speaking communities. And I really want to lean into that community support because this is exactly what Reforma was intended to be a support for us as professionals, but also to be able to respond to those evolving and changing and immediate community needs and understanding how those impacts can shift the work that we all do within our communities as library workers, as librarians, as working in various institutions, whether it's public, academic, private, and responding to what those needs are, but also making sure that we're pouring into that self-care and that support within each other as an organization and as professionals. So again, this is a very timely topic, but I think this is a topic that's important all of the time. So thank you to those folks that are joining and that are participating in this. And I will be remiss not to let you know what is coming down the line with Reforma currently. So I want to invite anybody that is a library school student to apply for our scholarship that is currently open. So that application can be submitted through March 31st. So anybody that is looking for support, Reforma is very proud to be able to continue to support annually our students that are in library school. And we want you all to apply for those opportunities. Also, it's not too late, but today is the last day to apply for the Dia mini grants. So if any of you are hosting Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros programs at your libraries, Reforma does support for that annually, and the deadline is today at midnight. So you still have a little bit of time after this conversation. And lastly, for Reforma members, we also have a call out right now for nominations for awards, recognizing the important work that our Reforma members are doing within the organization. So we have the Dr. Anulfo Trejo Librarian of the Year Award nominations, as well as the Lifetime Achievement Award nominations open through April 15th. So just a little bit about what is happening right now with Reforma and opportunities for all of you to consider. Thank you again, Loida, for hosting and for the affinity group for hosting this important topic. And I don't want to keep us all from listening to our wonderful speakers here, and want to welcome them and thank you all for being here again. You are muted, Loida.
All right, bingo. If that is a bingo card, shut now. Okay. Thank you again, Addie, and everyone at the leadership for supporting these initiatives. And before going to the speaker, make sure that you, if you want to use the chat, you're able to. You can share where you are joining us today, and you can write your questions in the Q&A so I can see them, faster than the chat. So now, with that said, please join me in welcoming Dr. Beth Wahler.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on one second. Okay. So as Loida said, I'm Beth Wahler. I'm a consultant who works with libraries around the country and internationally, and libraries of all sizes and types at this point, around two different streams of work. One is responding to behavioral challenges or social service related needs of their users. And one stream of my work is really around reducing staff stress and trauma and how we can put strategies in place to support staff to be able to sustain themselves with this work. So I was excited to be invited as a speaker today because it gives me an opportunity to really talk about some things that address both of those pieces, how we can serve our communities, but also how we can all care for ourselves. You will get the slides after this. So there are some links, for example, the things that you see underlined here are links if you are interested in the podcast or my book or my consulting services in any way. But I'm trying to cram about 3 or 4 hours of content in 20 minutes or less, so we're going to get straight to it. I'm going to talk today about how trauma affects us and give a really brief overview of stress and trauma and its effects on the people we serve and on us. I'm going to share strategies for how libraries can respond to the collective trauma and stress and grief that we're seeing in our communities, as well as share strategies for self-preservation and self-care while doing this work. So I'm going to sort of skim through the first part as quickly as possible. Again, you'll get the slides after this presentation so that I can focus on the strategies, because I think that's probably the piece that many of you are eager to learn about and hear about. So just sort of briefly wanted to talk about what trauma is, because we throw that term around a lot in our society, and it does sort of encompass a lot of different things that people experience. And the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration here in the US frames trauma through this 3E framework, which is how we can come to understand why so many different things can be experienced as trauma for different people. And the 3E framework just says that anything can be trauma if we experience some sort of event. And the second E is that it is experienced as really frightening, scary, life-changing, extremely negative, something really scary or negative. And the third E is that it has an effect after it is over. And that can affect us in different ways. It looks different for different people based on what kind of trauma we experience and whether we've had other trauma, what kind of resources we have to help support us through that trauma, those kinds of things. But when we look at what's happening in libraries and in our communities in general, we see many people that are experiencing different events and different things that are trauma. They're life-changing for them. They cause an effect after it's over. And we also think about trauma in terms of big T trauma, which are those big events or incidents that happen, some sort of act of violence or assault. But we also have little T traumas, which are sort of those little things that chip away at us day after day after day. And both big T traumas and little T traumas can have the same sort of effects on our physical health and our mental health and our functioning, which we'll talk about in just a second. When we look at trauma, we do see that here, actually globally, nearly 3/4 of all adults have experienced some kind of trauma in their lives. So we can bet that most of the people we interact with on any given day, whether we're talking about the patrons or visitors in our library, or if we're talking about ourselves, our social networks, our colleagues, that the majority of people have experienced something that was traumatic, and many people experience chronic trauma or multiple traumas. And depending on what we experience and how old we are and how we make sense of it, we can be impacted in a number of different ways. And sometimes we only think about things like post-traumatic stress disorder, and people know about and have heard about PTSD. But really, PTSD is a set of symptoms or indicators resulting from trauma that only a small portion of people who've experienced trauma go on to develop. And there are many other kinds of trauma responses that often people don't even understand are related to the trauma that we've experienced. So trauma responses vary, but they're really any way that our body or brain is trying to adapt to something that was really harmful for us or harmful that occurred to us. And it is normal when we look at experiences after a trauma that someone has gone through. We can often see that it impacts people's overall sense of safety in the world, which then leads people to be really defensive sometimes or to feel really unsafe around others, and that can impact behavior that we see in libraries. It also can impact people's psychological functioning, mental health. We see higher rates of depression and anxiety, suicidal ideation, substance abuse, those kinds of things in people who've experienced trauma. It can impact our cognitive functioning and how well we can retain information or focus or concentrate. It impacts our social functioning and how we relate to others and whether we can read social cues or interpret social cues or emotional cues from others. It can impact behavior, and many of the things we see in libraries that look disruptive or sometimes look bizarre or can be harmful are actually trauma responses that somebody learned as a way to cope with something harmful that happened to them. And trauma is more than just what happens to us as individuals. So sometimes people focus on traumatic events that somebody experiences directly, but we also know that there are many kinds of collective traumas that impact us and also can cause those same trauma responses. So we see people sometimes experience organizational trauma where there's workplace violence or there's bullying in the workplace or a toxic work culture that can cause trauma responses, even for people that may not directly have experienced some sort of incident. We also see intergenerational or historical trauma from people whose ancestors or family members experienced things like slavery or forced colonization or severe harm of some kind. We see trauma responses in the descendants of those individuals. We certainly see cultural and race-based trauma. And we're seeing that widely right now, especially in communities of color, immigrant communities, Latino communities, LGBTQ plus communities. We see that cultural trauma happening. We see community violence that impacts people who may not have directly been part of a violent act, but are part of that community and again can experience trauma responses just from sharing the same community with people who were part of that violent act. And we see that right now, especially in communities where ICE is present, where there are assaults that are happening on people every day. And the natural disasters are another kind of collective trauma or community level trauma. And when we think about the populations that we serve and the communities we serve, and we particularly really think about marginalized communities, people of color, immigrant communities right now living here in the United States, we see lots of this intergenerational or historical trauma, lots of cultural trauma, race-based trauma, and community violence that is impacting how people are functioning and how people feel physically and emotionally. And this is causing a lot of strain for library workers at all different levels. So we know when we look at what's happened in libraries in general over the past decade or more, that library workers are feeling an incredible sense of stress and strain already from serving growing numbers of community members who have complex needs, like social service related needs. We also see that library workers are experiencing growing visitor behavioral problems that are affecting their stress and strain, the growing demands of the public on libraries. So expectations of the public are changing, and people are really expecting more and more and more from libraries at the same time that funding is often shrinking or remaining sort of stable or steady. And then the growing threats to intellectual freedom are also causing a lot of stress and strain for library workers. Also, the blurred boundaries around the role of the library. And, we see that causing a lot of stress for library workers. So there are these growing expectations that libraries are part of the crisis response system in their community, that library workers will be trained on how to respond to individual crises or how to de-escalate someone in crisis. Libraries are often part of a community's disaster response plan. Libraries are providing a great deal of immigration support and community support during times of political instability. And these blurred boundaries around what the role of the library is and what the role of individual library workers is with these kinds of things also adds to the stress and strain that library workers often feel. Then you add in the sense of vocational awe, the term coined by the late Fobazi Itar, that really adds to that strain too, where library workers carry this burden of feeling like the library is the last savior of democracy and the last support for people in our communities who may not have support elsewhere. And that adds to that pressure and stress and strain that people feel. We also know that library workers experience their own traumas. And many of you in the audience may have experienced your own traumatic incidents either at work or elsewhere, because as I mentioned, 3/4 of all adults have experienced some kind of trauma. We also, in libraries and other public serving, helping professions, are at risk for something called vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, which is when we can experience a trauma response as if we experienced that trauma firsthand, but it's really just from being present with other people who've experienced those traumas, hearing those stories when people come to the library and tell us about what they're experiencing or what their family members have experienced. That can cause trauma responses as if we had experienced that trauma firsthand. We also, in public serving, helping professions, see a lot of compassion fatigue right now, which is when we just start feeling sort of numb and we can't take anymore. And it's something that results from having high levels of empathy with people who are in really desperate situations. And we're seeing lots of burnout right now, where the work-related stress and strain exceeds, our ability to be resilient to that. That the systemic and structural stresses are more than we can sometimes cope with effectively. And so all of these things are impacting library workers. And although they all have slightly different causes, they all impact our mental health and how we feel, how exhausted we feel. They impact our physical health and functioning, our overall well-being, and they can certainly impact our work satisfaction and an ability to kind of keep going in our jobs. So what we see, especially when we're talking about community level stressors and strains and traumas and serving communities and being part of a community that is experiencing a lot of violence, stress, and strain, we see people in libraries who really feel like this little image here, like they're on fire because you find yourself dealing with the stress and strain of being part of the community and living in the community, but also expected to try to provide support to others who depend on you for help. It adds a double load and sort of a double layer of stress and trauma. And for any of you who are supervisors or managers, that load increases because you have your own personal effects of the trauma that you may experience as part of the community, but you're also trying to support staff who are talking about how burned out they feel and how they're struggling, and also trying to respond to the needs of the community. So we do wind up with people who really feel extremely overwhelmed, trying to provide support to others while going through and experiencing these traumas and grief and all of these things ourselves at the same time. So shifting to kind of what do we do about this? Because that's usually what people want to know is how do we help with these things? How do we make a difference? How do we support our communities and try to help our communities as best as we can? But also how do we help ourselves and how do we help each other in our libraries? So I want to emphasize first that really relationships matter most. Community is everything. And this is something that libraries do exceptionally well for your communities, where that relationship matters more than any other sort of strategy you might use. And when we look at the research about relationships and how they make a difference in community and support, what we see is that with all kinds of trauma, with all kinds of grief, with all kinds of stress and strain, that people's outcomes are much better. Their functioning is better. Their mental health is better. Their physical health is better. They feel more resilient when they have relationships with other people. And it doesn't even have to be a great number of relationships, but a relationship with somebody else that feels like it's grounded in trust and mutual respect and valuing each other and empathy and understanding. So the number one thing you can do for your communities and for yourselves is to really focus on those relationships with others and creating that community and maintaining that community. And as we look at what pieces of social support are most helpful to help people be able to cope with incredible stress and strain, we see a number of different aspects of what we call social support. And again, these are all things that libraries can do very well, either directly through services that you provide or by bringing other community partners or other resources into your space to directly reach your communities that you serve. And so those types of social support that are so important are emotional support, again, just showing respect, validating people's emotions, normalizing the experiences people have, so that they don't feel like something's wrong with them if they're not doing very well. It's really powerful to just validate what somebody experiences sometimes. Creating a sense of belonging and connection is another really important aspect of social support. Helping people feel valued for who they are is another really essential piece of social support. Offering practical help. So, if people need connected to a resource, trying to directly connect people with that resource can be extremely helpful. And then just providing information and guidance and direction when people are struggling and don't know where to turn. And again, when we look at all of these different aspects of social support, these are things that you do very well already. So even though it feels sometimes like we are not making a dent in the circumstances people have, or we may start feeling like we're powerless or we don't have an ability to address whatever need they have, I want to bring you back to this, that you actually do have a significant impact on your communities by offering these things either directly or by bringing other people into your space that can directly address those types of support. When we look at how we can help ourselves, though, to get through this, because it's one thing to try to help our communities, but we also have to help sustain ourselves right now, which is really difficult in such uncertain and harmful and challenging times. A couple things to keep in mind. One is as we experience stress and strain, Our bodies and our brains respond to that by activating our nervous system, and we actually become dysregulated. Those are the times we feel our heart racing. We might feel like we're really anxious. We might have trouble focusing. We might have trouble taking deep breaths. We can usually identify, like when we feel stressed, that's when our nervous system has become dysregulated. That is when it actually is really important to take some sort of step to try to regulate ourselves, because the more our nervous system stays dysregulated and the more frequently and chronically that happens, that's when we start seeing those physiological effects and the mental health effects of the stress on us. So we want to get in the habit of regularly doing things. They're really short, simple things that can quickly regulate our nervous systems when we're dysregulated. And there are some links here to some little short videos, but really these are three different things. One is focusing on some sort of movement. It doesn't even have to be big. Sometimes people just do things like shake their arms out, jump, go for a walk, some quick chair yoga or stretching. All of those things can actually help our bodies process those neurotransmitters and the stress hormones and can help regulate ourselves. Breathing exercises that help slow our breathing or deepen our breathing can very quickly help regulate ourselves. And one of the most powerful ones is this physiological sighing, which there's a quick link there, which is an exercise that all we do is take one deep breath through our nose, and then we take a second really quick deep breath through our nose before exhaling. And then we exhale slowly through our mouths. And it actually has a ton of research that shows it's one of the quickest ways to regulate our nervous systems when we are dysregulated. Also, activating our senses. So, listening to music that's calming, singing or humming, having some sort of temperature change. So, some people will hold ice or go put their hands under warm water, or all of those kinds of things can be very quickly regulating as well. So, we want to get in the habit of doing these things consistently to help regulate our nervous systems, which can help us to function better and feel better. Grounding exercises, you've got a link there to an exercise that you can use when you're feeling a sense of overwhelm or a high anxiety. All it is walking through, like bringing ourselves back to this present moment and out of that high state of anxiety by thinking about what are 5 things that I can see right now and sort of naming those to ourselves. What are 4 things I can hear right now? What are 3 things I can feel right now? It's just a way of grounding ourselves and can quickly, again, regulate us when we're dysregulated. We also want to think about boundaries as a tool that we can use to help ourselves internally as well as helping ourselves externally. So, internal boundaries are reminding ourselves of our role, like actually self talk, talking to ourselves about. We often hear really stressful, distressing things from the people that we work with in our libraries, the people we serve, but we can't solve all of those, and it's not our role to solve all of those. And we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes and stop and reflect. We also have to remind ourselves that it is our role to do our job, but that doesn't mean that we have to be present and fully provide support for every single need that people have. That's not a realistic expectation, and it sets us up for more stress and strain and burnout. So, and I'll talk just a minute about external boundaries and how we can set boundaries with others, but we also just have to have these conversations with ourselves. We want to also think about our sense of agency. We are out of, like, some things are out of our control, but there are things that are in our control. So we want to focus on that and really exercise our own agency there and impact the things we can. We also sometimes have to limit engagement with additional stressors during high stress times. So there are certain people that, if possible, we need to try to avoid them. There are people in our lives, sometimes people in our own families. There are places we may avoid because they're stressful for us. Doom scrolling for extended periods of time on social media. All of these kinds of things can add to our stress and strain. And in high stress times, we have to limit some of those to protect ourselves. Also, name and normalize the double load for yourself. So it's okay to tell ourselves, it's okay that I'm not okay. Like we have these pressures on ourselves sometimes that, again, are really unrealistic because we're not robots, we're not machines, we're not superheroes, no matter what people say sometimes about library workers or social workers. Sometimes people have very high expectations for us that are not realistic. And we have to tell ourselves, it's okay that I'm not okay. It's really a sign that I'm a normal person that's responding to these circumstances around me. We also have to remember that feeling irritable or feeling numb or feeling exhausted, all of these are really common stress responses. They're not an indicator that something's wrong with us. And in fact, they're an indicator that our body is working the way it's supposed to, and we're just living in really difficult times. We have to expect different output and performance while we're going through hard times. And we have to set priorities and remind ourselves again that we're doing the best we can. We also want to think about how we connect with our own communities at work and elsewhere. We want to normalize talking about the impact of the work and being able to say, this interaction's really sticking with me, or I had a really rough day today, or this was really hard, or I'm struggling right now outside of work. And we want to seek cultural anchors that help connect us to our own community. Again, that community piece, the relationships, the community is so powerful and healing. So we want to stay in tune with that ourselves and seek out music or spiritual practices or physical reminders of our community, or cultural gatherings or social supports that help connect us to our own communities, which can help us then be resilient and thrive even during difficult times. When we need to set external boundaries with others, here are some sample scripts that you can keep in mind, because again, we can't be there for absolutely everybody all the time. So you'll have these slides to go over them. I'll just read one from each. So if it's a coworker that's talking about something that you really don't have the energy for, it's okay to say, I really care about what you're going through and I want to give it my full attention, but I'm not in a great headspace today. Can we talk about this later? If it's a patron or a visitor who's dumping on you something that you really don't have the bandwidth to handle, it's okay to say, I want to help you get the support you need, but I'm not the right person for this. Would you like me to find you a number for a mental health provider or a crisis line or whatever the appropriate resource would be? But it's okay to say, I really want to help you, but I'm not the right person for this. When people do, because people do sometimes treat you as their therapist. Um, some signs that you or others might actually need some professional mental health support. These are some symptoms that you might need some support. So if you're having a lot of intrusive thoughts, difficulty regulating your own emotions, symptoms of depression or anxiety that are interfering with your ability to function, avoiding lots of things that used to be enjoyable for you, feeling really hypervigilant, which means just always on edge or like easily startled or jumpy. If you have self-harming behavior or thoughts, if you're feeling really hopeless, if you're using drugs or alcohol to cope, any of these kinds of things are signs that you could use some professional mental health support. But what I want to say there is you really want to seek out culturally responsive mental health support. The mental health industry as a whole sometimes has pathologized things that are actually, again, normal responses to the environment somebody is living in and the trauma that's being experienced. So you want to seek out somebody who is aware of that and going to acknowledge that. Then really briefly, as I wrap up my section so that David can talk, when you think about how to support each other, really focus on that community piece again, build community, build relationships, think about affinity groups such as this one, or networks of intentional peer support so that you can check in with each other, provide care and concern, create space to talk about or process the realities right now. You might consider creating formal debriefing processes. There are some examples that I think can be found online of libraries that have done this to help staff process difficult incidents and stressful times. You also want to think about how you can give permission for people to step back from certain interactions that might be harmful or particularly activating for them. Think about in your teams and in your groups how you can discuss together how to recognize when somebody's triggered, somebody's upset, somebody's activated and needs to step back, so that you can help as needed in a way that is appropriate and welcomed by that person. You also want to reframe for each other, that, first of all, self-care is not selfish. Also, some of the incidents and behaviors we see have a lot to do with that person's experiences and what they've been through. And we want to think about that and what they might have been through that's made them act the way they are. And then we also want to reframe for each other that stress and strain and struggles are normal. And again, not failure or not a lack of resilience that somebody has. As a workplace or as a team, you want to examine capacity. If you have a lot of people that are directly impacted by trauma and stress that's happening collectively right now, we do have to look at capacity and adjust priorities sometimes. We have to know that people's performance is not going to be peak level right now, and that's normal. And we want to look for ways to reduce the load on individual staff. So thinking about common concerns that the community members have, common needs that our patrons have, how can we anticipate those and create resource corners or areas where people can find handouts about resources, which makes it easy for staff to sort of direct people to that area at least some of the time. We also sometimes can invite community partners to come in to set up tables or to lead programs where they might teach grounding exercises to the community or teach different strategies for regulating our nervous systems to our communities. We can bring in community partners to offer culturally grounded programs that can help further build community and a sense of community and add support. And we can think about those 5 aspects of social support I mentioned earlier and look for providers or partners, or in some cases, volunteers who can come in and facilitate different programs or share resources that help build those. So when you get the slides, you'll have some additional resources at the end. You'll also have my contact information. I will have a couple of minutes now for some quick questions, but I wanted to leave you with my contact information as well if you have questions after this.
Thank you so much, Beth. And we have so much information, so I hope everybody can come back to the recording and the slides. I don't see questions here, but I wanted to, and you probably mentioned this, but perhaps to highlight, I wanted to ask you this, what does success look like when community care is truly integrated into library culture? If you give us just a few pointers.
Yeah, that's a good question. When community care is really integrated into a culture, we do see places where people feel safe enough to speak up. That psychological safety piece is important. People feel safe to ask for help. People feel safe to say when they're struggling. People feel safe to say when there's harm happening, and the group works together to look for solutions when possible. We also see people who are supported to then, sometimes when people do need additional resources, like a mental health provider, people are supported. Nobody's blamed. That's not stigmatized in any way. So those are the kinds of things that we see when collective care and community care is integrated.
Thank you so much. And perhaps you can, where you sit, right? You work with different libraries and different, I will say, groups from different, perhaps ethnic groups and so on. So as an ally, what role can allies play in community care without taking perhaps leadership from the actual members from these groups? And we will share this recording with different groups. So I think this is an important question too.
Yes, I think the big thing is, as you said, not to take over leadership from people in the group, and to listen to people's experiences, validate those experiences. Listen to what people are asking for support. Listen to what people need, and stepping back and supporting those things. So it is about stepping back not necessarily stepping up unless you're asked to by the group to step up, and just listening to what individuals in that group with those experiences are saying that they want and need.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your time and generous contributions. And now we will welcome David Perez. He's coming from New Jersey, and he is every day he is facing different situations and helping patrons in his library. And so, welcome, David. And you can have the full time. We'll just go over some minutes, but I think it's important to listen to you as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Loida. And thank you, Beth, even though she had to go. Beth is a good friend of mine, and she is a great speaker. She has a lot of information. And it will be beneficial when you share this recording. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So my name is David Perez, and I'm or Perez, depending on what side of the country you live on. In the East Coast, everybody says Perez. And when I was in the Army for 10 years, and when I was out West, everybody, no matter what race, always pronounced it Perez. So, and I appreciated that. I'm the bilingual library social worker at the Long Branch Free Public Library in New Jersey. I'm also currently an MSLIS student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm halfway through my degree. I'm enjoying every semester, and I am looking forward to becoming a librarian. And that being said, what I've been doing here, and I've been doing library social work here in New Jersey for the past 10 years. The Long Branch Free Public Library is the very first public library in the state of New Jersey to hire a full-time social worker who is myself. So I'm the first one in the state. I'm one of the first cohorts of library social work pioneers in the country. I am one of the original PLA social work task force members, and I enjoy advocating for library social work throughout the United States. I've worked with the California State Library, Connecticut State Library, even collaborated with librarians and library social work colleagues in Australia. So I am absolutely focused on the macro level of what I do. Although in the library, I do what in social work we call micro, meso, and macro social work. So in the library setting, I'm able to engage in all levels of social work. So micro being one-on-one direct practice, meso being groups, could be a book club even in a library setting, but more like groups and meetings and programming at the library. Could be a meso social work setting. And then, of course, macro would be like what I'm doing right now, engaging on a large scale across the country. Obviously, this is a national organization that is, and I'm a Reforma member, just so that everybody knows. I thought that was important. And I understand the impact of Reforma. So macro level, and macro social work can also intersect with public policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's who I am. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Loida, for inviting me. I love connecting and communicating with my library colleagues. And I especially like connecting with my Latino library colleagues. Latino, Latina, Latine, Latinx, whatever term you use. I love it because we're here to support each other, no matter what librarian you are. But we have to, and that is actually the title of our presentation today, supporting each other. So I do have a PowerPoint which is going to be shared with you. I don't know if I'll have time to cover it the way that I want to. I will cover it, but the way that I want to is going to take me more than 15 or 20 minutes. But I do want to start off by sharing something with you that I just acquired from library school within the past 2 weeks. And I just spoke about it at the New Jersey Library Association annual conference at Atlantic City at the Hard Rock this past week, where I presented. I submitted a session that was accepted, and I presented to librarians. I wanted to draw our attention to the history of the history of public libraries, and what came out of the Great Depression, the New Deal, and then ultimately the WPA, which stands for the Works Progress Administration. So much came out of these policies, but very specific to libraries. The WPA refined community care in libraries. And this is all, we're talking about the 1930s right now. New Deal library programs, particularly those under the Work Progress Administration in 1935, laid the structural and philosophical groundwork for modern library social work. So although, yes, we could say that library social work is a social innovation and it started in 2009 at the San Francisco Public Library, which is true, with a very close colleague, Leah Esquera, at San Francisco, is true, but it is not a brand new concept to what we do in libraries. During the Great Depression, extreme funding inequities and widespread unemployment threatened the survival of public libraries, especially in rural and underserved communities. It's like history repeating itself right now. Through federal wage support combined with local sponsorship, the WPA dramatically expanded access by creating new libraries, deploying bookmobiles, which this is where we get the whole idea of the bookmobile, establishing deposit stations in unconventional spaces, and supporting outreach, and I love this one, supporting outreach efforts such as Kentucky's Pack Horse Librarians. We're talking about librarians on horseback delivering books to people, and that's how serious it was. So think about homebound. These initiatives reposition libraries as active agents within the broader social welfare system rather than passive cultural institutions. So this is when public libraries began to obtain or acquire a new identity. As the nation transitioned into World War II, WPA libraries further demonstrated adaptability by serving as information centers for military personnel, defense communities, reinforcing their role as crisis response infrastructure. We are seeing this today. The reason why I'm taking time to go over this is because what happened in the 1930s is not far from what's happening today in libraries. And the community need for libraries to be what we are being, who we are to the communities is just as important as it was in the 30s. While not framed explicitly in contemporary social justice language, these programs operationalized equity by redistributing access to information and embedding care-oriented labor with public institutions. This supports the theory that today's embedded library social workers continue a trajectory that began in the 1930s and challenges library leaders to view people-centered services, not as innovations, but as a historically grounded extension of librarianship's civic mission. So with that, I'm going to start my slides. So here's how we'll hold this conversation. And this is not for nothing, but this is a really good PowerPoint. There's a lot of information in here. So we're going to talk about trauma, and we won't spend a lot of time on trauma because Beth just talked a lot about trauma. So we will talk about trauma, grief, crisis, stress. Actually, Beth talked about all of that. Participate at the level that feels safe for you. You're welcome to step out, pause. Well, this is actually geared for a conference, which is what we have. But um, ground rules, well, you can see the agenda. The agenda covers trauma-informed foundations, practical in-the-moment supports, system of care for staff, which is really what we want to focus on today. And then ultimately, it's something you can take away, one action you can take next week. So hold on 1 second. Okay, there we go. So why does this matter in libraries? Libraries as a refuge. And we hear this over and over and over. Libraries safe space, it's a trusted space. Libraries can often are often a safe enough space where other systems feel inaccessible. Um, Learning information needs intensify during crisis. So this is very specific to libraries because that is what we do. We are in the business of information needs. So what is information needs behavior or human behavior is what we are here to deliver to people, right? And like Loida said in the beginning, what we do for the community and our patrons is really the same lens that we should approach each other in libraries and support each other in libraries. I mean, I'm going to tell you the truth. As a library social worker, the whole entire staff here knows that I'm here not just for the patrons, I'm also here for the staff. And that they made it extremely, they've become extremely vocal with letting me know that they appreciate that very much. I've had people come in to my office with very personal business where all they needed was someone to talk to. They don't have anybody to talk to, or they're looking for resources, and I'm talking the same stuff that I'm engaged with in the community: food insecurity, domestic violence, sexual violence, affordable housing, affordable healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And connection, community grief shows up in everyday interactions we witness and respond. Sorry. Okay, so trauma-informed foundations, I'm not going to go into this a lot because Beth did a lot of that. This will be in the slides, but this is SAMHSA's 6 guiding principles. And SAMHSA, for you guys that don't know, and you may all know, but I'm just going to make sure that everyone knows that it stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So this is a federal component, federal policy, which aims to improve or address or support the mental health of the citizens of the United States of America and the territories, right? So basically, it's our government's response or solution to mental health crises, et cetera. So a practical lens, the 4 R's. So realize, recognize, respond, and resist. Realize trauma is widespread. Recognize, notice signs, triggers. Sometimes, like Beth was talking about, with being withdrawn, that sort of thing. Respond, integrate knowledge into practice and communication. Resist, avoid re-traumatization for patrons and staff. And it's called secondary trauma, which is interesting when I learned about this because we can traumatize again. And so it's sort of like this. A person experiencing homelessness comes into the library because it's a safe space, it's warm, or it's cool, or whatever. They come in here to be safe. And then they're being told, yo, listen, you can't sleep in here. Or, hey, hello, you have an extreme and overpowering body odor that we don't want our patrons to have to deal with that, and those are just 2 quick examples of things that can happen. I'm not saying that it happens over here. I'm just saying that it happens in some places. And so that's considered secondary trauma. So a lens shift in daily interactions, right? Just some practical tips that I'm providing here. from what's wrong with you to what happened and what do you need right now. So it's more of an empathetic, approach. It just demonstrates more compassion. And and whether we're talking about your engagement or your interaction with patrons or staff or coworkers, because sometimes like I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I come into work and I'm tired, and I have a lot going on, which is absolutely true. And I got to come in here and just jump right in. But um, I mean, I'm only human, right? And so we're only human. So there are gonna be days where we're not gonna be, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Doesn't mean that we have to attack each other. And even if the person is out of line or whatever, maybe give them some grace, because maybe something is going on. We don't even know what's going on. You know, it's a lot going on, as a matter of fact. Use universal precautions, assume trauma, just assume it. Just assume trauma may be present. And like Beth was saying, 3/4 of the world's population has experienced trauma. That's a lot of people. That's most of us. That's 3 out of 4. um, Offer choices, explain policies, check for consent, notice triggers, noise, crowds, authority tone, surveillance, right? These are things that make people antsy, like when somebody's following you in the store, you're like, yeah, all I want, I'm just browsing. Why do you have to follow me? Same thing like in the library, just allow grace. What trauma and stress can look like. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on trauma because Beth did a lot of that. But these are common library scenarios, acute grief, death, loss, displacement. All of these things happen in our lives. This is life. PTSD triggers, noise, right? I mean, I'm a veteran. I was in the Army for 10 years, by the way. So, I know what it is to sometimes, like I'm telling you today, it actually happened today. I opened, it was like I was going to get coffee and I opened the door, to come to my office, and one of the other staff members was like right there being funny, trying to scare me. And I was like, it, stuff like that. Um, Crisis visits. How these are the reasons why people come. These are library visits that have to do with crisis. Housing, benefits, legal stuff, school, health, the stuff that we just talked about that. Behavioral escalation, conflict at service points, right? The whole idea of de-escalation, how do we de-escalate? That's actually what I did in California, a workshop back in 2018 at Nevada City Library System. And it was about de-escalation because, the California State Library had a whole entire statewide campaign because they wanted libraries to get this training. So, if they're up here, don't meet them up here, meet them down here. Don't meet them where they're at, because like, let's say they're shouting, yo, 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 what are you talking about? Don't do that. Try to come in a little bit lower so you could try to bring them down. Because the fact of the matter is that they don't really want it like that, unless they do. And that's hopefully that's rare. But most people, they're just annoyed and agitated. Collective stress after local or global events, which is right on time right there. You got all this stuff happening in different parts around the country. ICE is threatening our communities. Our Latino communities are like under siege. Let's keep it 100 on this call. I just got done last semester a class at University of Illinois. I love this class. It was cool. And you guys might know her, Bethsaida Reyes. She's de Reforma también. Um, she was the professor, but the class was library resources to Spanish-speaking populations. And we got so deep into what is happening in our communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how libraries, can meet those needs and everything. But yeah, I mean, I have people coming in here. They're like, yo, David, tú me puedes hacer una carta para el hijo, los hijos míos, por si acaso, si me llevan a mí, los hijos se quedan con la vecina. It's like they're really trying to figure out different ways, and they're like in a panic. A lot of people are in a panic. Anyway, you guys already know that. Reframe words. Behavior is communication. Ask what is the need under the behavior, because there's always something else. Usually it's not, the presenting need. There's always like layers of intersecting needs behind that. Um, so I'm going to go on because I know that I'm talking a lot. A simple response to psychological first aid, PFA, right? So psychological first aid is humane, supportive, and practical help in the aftermath of distressing events. So look, listen, link. You're going to have all this in your slides. Is anyone in immediate danger, right? What's happening right now? What do they need first? Water, whatever. I'm always offering water. ¿Tú quieres un cafecito? I'm offering water, café, like whatever. If I can get something from the vending machine, I'll do that too because it chills people out. And I'm talking patrons and staff. It just chills them out. I have an office, thank God that my director authorized building me an office, and it's very private, it's very spacious, and I decorated it like a living room. So staff come in here and they can just relax, and vamos a tomar café, vamos a hablar de la situación tomando café y eso, So anyway, um, listen, approach respectfully, ask consent, right? So, always with respect, listen without pressuring for details, validate feelings, right? These are all good points and great advice. Validation, slow the pace, slow down, link, offer options and next steps. I don't just give phone numbers. Oh yeah, here you go. Here's a whole page of 1-800 numbers. I don't do that. If it's a number, then we call right here. And usually I start the conversation, hey, how you doing? This is David Perez, the library social worker, whatever. I'm sitting with a library patron and I'd like to refer them to you. And so I'm advocating and I'm partnering with that person. Again, whether it's patron or staff, because I've done both sides. Trauma-informed de-escalation. We just talked about de-escalation a little bit. I'm going to skip over this slide. You'll have it. Role clarity and warm handoff. Warm handoffs, very important. The phrase warm handoff is very important. Would you like me to help connect you with someone who can support you more directly? Beth was talking about that too a little bit, but it's better than just saying, you got to go to social services, or you got to go to whatever, or you got to go, the food pantries across the street. The person is in crisis. The person doesn't want to hear that. I mean, you can legit do that and be within the limits of your job description. But really, the warm handoff or the warm referral, I've heard warm referral before too, is so much more impactful because it shows that, you're willing to do it with them, and that you care. So what we can do, create safety and predict. I'm not even going to read these right here because you're going to have these in the slide, and I'm going to give you my information in case you want to talk about this some more. But these are very helpful tips. And if I want to highlight anything on this slide, it's the warm handoff for sure. Caring for staff. So here we go. Secondary trauma and burnout, which is so real, so real. Stress reactions and PTSD-like symptoms from indirect exposure to others' traumas. Stories, crisis, repeated distress. These are some possible signs. STS or secondary trauma stress is a workplace issue. It's not a personal failure. So the thing is to not personalize these scenarios and not to allow these scenarios to define who you are or what you can do or that you're weak or that you can't handle it or that whatever or that you're an imposter or whatever. It's not about that at all. It calls for support, recovery time, and organizational practices. Burnout. WHO ICD-11. A syndrome. This is a syndrome. This is from the DSM. This is a syndrome from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So I didn't even know that, to tell you the truth, until I came across this research. It's a real thing. It's a real thing, and it can affect your health. Workplace stress, etc., can affect your health. So we want to do things, to avoid that and to help that. 3 dimensions: exhaustion, cynicism, mental distance, reduced professional efficacy. What reduces risk? Reasonable workload, plus, sufficient staffing, peer support. That's what we're talking about now. And supervision, clear supervision, clear policies and training, recovery time, and critical incidents. And I'm going to add one more to that: professional development, because my kids are like, Dad, when are you going to stop going to school? I'm like, listen, I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I feel like we're going to be students for the rest of our lives in one way or another. But professional development, because you grow and you become more empowered with this stuff. What helps us keep showing up? Right? 60-second reset between patrons. This is the stuff that Beth was talking about, the breathing and stuff like that. Hydrate, snack, make sure that that you're not trying to starve yourself, and take your break, please. Take your breaks, take your vacations. Really important. Like Loya's background, it's like she's working, but she's like in Puerto Rico somewhere, like parece que es Luquillo por ahí. End of shift closeout ritual, you know, how do you say it? My watch tells me all the time, and the ring, the aura ring, it's like before I'm gonna go to bed, it's like start to wind down. And even we can do the wind down thing at work, before, instead of going 100 miles and then you're flying out the door and then you're driving like that, maybe take maybe 10 or 15 or something if you can, and sort of close out. Boundaries, what's mine to carry, right? So boundaries is really, really big. Beth was talking about that too. We can't solve every problem all the time. Team, so buddy system, right? So just, um, team building exercises and team building um, programs. And then organizationally, training and clear escalation pathways. This is stuff that we're doing right now, organizational stuff, supervision and psychological safety, after incident support, partnerships. I feel like we've all seen this, because things happen, things jump off in the library all the time. Okay. Now, this is very interesting. So a 1-minute reflection, build a care map, right? One item, and you can do this. I mean, obviously we're not doing this right now, but you can do this on your own, right? One item inside each circle. So these are good takeaways. One boundary or micro recovery practice, one peer support, one referral pathway, right? Hold on one second, I'm sorry. What? And then these are some resources to take with you. So core frameworks, these are some really good books. The PLA Trauma Informed Frameworks for Supporting Patrons workbook is a workbook that was a collaboration with the PLA Social Work Task Force, which I was an original member of. Really, really good. It's actually a workbook, so you could actually copy pages of it and you can share it like at a staff in service and stuff like that. Really, really good. PLA has the de-escalation. There's a book that just came out on de-escalation. One of my colleagues in conjunction with PLA. So ALA, PLA, and there's some more stuff out there. I actually have a published chapter in a social work textbook that I could share too, but I'm gonna stop. This is my last slide, so I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna put my stuff, my contact information into the chat.
Thank you so much, David. This is just it's a treat. I mean, in terms of information and the strategies, thank you so much. I am sure everyone is just waiting for the slides, right? And the recording. We are going to share both together, perhaps in a couple of weeks. And as I said, we'll share this recording also with on the listservs of the other national association of librarians of color.
Okay.
And now I would like to ask if someone has questions for David, please, you can put them on the Q&A or on the chat. I see everybody's a bit quiet today. We are just taking all the information in. Um, if there are no questions, I would like to ask Davey a couple of things before
Yes.
we close. So we are Latinos, right? We are from groups that are vulnerable populations or historically marginalized. And so how can we support each other in terms of vulnerable and vulnerable populations, because we have patrons, right? And then we have colleagues. But now I'm talking about us as library workers. Maybe you have a couple of pointers. I know this could be a whole class, right? Semester class,
Right.
but yes, from your point of view of social worker, your experience.
I think it's important to share with each other, you know. I feel like, a lot of us are like highly, some of us are highly motivated. Like, we want to keep on going to school. We want to get another degree. We learn, we're participating in these conferences, and we're collaborating with, ALA and Reforma and Loida and this one and that one, Australia. Take that experience and share that experience, and work on grooming and passing the torch to somebody else. Don't hoard the blessings that you get from what you're learning, and especially amongst each other, because we have to help each other. We have enough people knocking us down. They've been knocking us down all our lives. Why are we knocking each other down? That's how I feel. So, with that in mind, I'm constantly looking for the opportunity to share something with our young Latino library workers, because they're the future librarians. I'm not going to be doing this forever. Who's next? Come on, let's go. So, professional development, sharing with them, encouraging them, and letting them know that you're proud of them and stuff like that.
Love it, love it, love it. Yes, and it goes along with one of the former founders, Dr. Arnulfo Trejo. He had something that it was I'm paraphrasing, but it was something about the circle of giving back. And once you're a leader, it is a responsibility of helping others and also to keep up. We have a question here in the chat. David, how did you get started in having a social worker role in the library? This person is interested in pursuing becoming a librarian and a social worker. And
Oh, nice.
yes.
So it was crazy. It was so organic. Like I can't even answer that question because I don't even know. I started libraries. I mean, I'm sorry. I started social work school at Monmouth University as a graduate student. I was the result of the Great Recession. I lost my job, whatever. I'm a veteran. The VA said they would pay. I went to the school, whatever. I got accepted, and I had to have an active internship because with the social work grad school, you had to have internship from the first semester, which I thought was a great idea. So they sent me here. I didn't even know that this was a thing. It wasn't even a thing, to be honest. They sent me here. They said, "Well, what do you think about going to the Long Branch Free Public Library?" I was like, "What?" I was like, "How in the world does that even make sense? This is social work. That's a library. I got military, this, that." And they said, "Well, you know what, David, just go interview, and then let me know." And that's exactly how it started. I came in here because I could walk to this library from where I live. So that was another plus. I was like, yeah, maybe if I get an internship there, I could just walk to the thing. So, because I used to commute from Jersey, like Central Jersey, to the Bronx. So I used to work in the South Bronx. I was born and raised in the Bronx, originally. So I still had a job in the Bronx when we moved to Jersey. But anyway, so I knew what it was like to commute. So the fact that I could walk here, I was like, oh no, no, let me go on the interview. And I fell in love with what she had to say. Tanya, tú conoces a Tanya Garcia.
Yes, yes.
She told me, David, I want to do this and that and this. And when she wanted to invite social service agencies into the library so that the people didn't have to take two or three buses just to get to apply for food stamps and all this other stuff that she was telling me. And I said, wow, that sounds great. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot. And I never left. I never left. So this happened organically. What's important, and the person who is asking this question, I don't know the person's name, but what's important in this is that the library director and the board of trustees is on board. Because if you don't have that in the particular place that you're thinking about, then you're not going to have it. They have to be on board with this. There are websites that are specific to library jobs across the United States. There's one that, with library social work jobs. Like I get notices like Miami-Dade was looking for one, Palm Beach was looking for one, like it'll just pop up. But we can definitely talk offline. So my information is in the chat. Call me, email me, and I will share a lot more with you.
Thank you so much, David. And now we have to go. But thank you, everyone. And the next kindness event is on April 8th, and it's a complete different topic about menopause matters in libraries, but still is part of even community care, right? For
You don't
us.
want me to talk about that too, Lloyd? No, I'm kidding. Sorry.
We got two speakers there, probably another one. So thank you everyone, and all the best for the weekend coming ahead. And expect the recording and the slides in the next weeks. And thank you to Reforma leadership and webmaster and the team. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Take care.